Welcome back into the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast after a relatively short hiatus, but let's face it, off-season isn't really a thing when it comes to basketball right now. We are back. It might be year 4 or 5 of me and Olgun podcasting together for ESPN, but I am Kane Pitman. The man next to me is Olgun Uluc, and Olgs, it's great to see you. Great to be back for another season that's going to be bigger and better than it has been in the past. Now, first, the last time I saw you, you were at a Las Vegas table bringing in a lot of cash. And people, it might surprise people. They might think that I would be the one that would stay up late, but you were an all-night operator in Vegas, and I hope that the last month has treated you as well as that night did on the tables.
Yeah, look, the tables are good to me until they're not. But the last month has been very, very, very enjoyable for me. Covering the off-season is one of my favorite things to do. Breaking news, free agency news, it's so much fun to me. It's one of my favorite times, but I'm over talking about all these teams and players and rosters, like ideas and concepts. I just want to see guys out there. That's why the Blitz was so much fun as well. Just finally seeing these guys on the court was really, really cool. And this season could not come soon enough. And I'm very excited that we're back doing this.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a bunch of topics to get to today on this show. So Bryce Cotton, not just moving to the Adelaide 36ers, that was the story of the offseason, but now Australian citizenship. What does that actually mean for what the 36ers can do cap-wise with flexibility? We're going to get into that. Now, the Illawarra Hawks, the champs. We have to talk about the champs, the team that I picked last year to win the title. So I just wanted one more chance to remind everyone. We're going to ask whether they have done enough to put themselves back in contention. And then, has there already been a war of words started with Kendric Davis, the Sydney Kings, and the Adelaide 36ers? We've got a little bit of sound for you to listen to, which does bring me to the point that this podcast is going to be bigger and better, Olgs. Our team in the US has taken it over. There are a bunch of stars. They work their ass off for all the shows that we do, nothing but net over here in the US, and they're going to have some video, they're going to have sound, and as you can already see, the production value is a lot higher. So thank you to Sydney, for Tessa, K2, Derek, Ben is somewhere lurking around the background, and everyone else that I forgot. It's a great team that we've got over here, and hopefully this podcast goes to a new level. But let's start with Bryce Cotton. Now, you broke the news on the weekend. I think it was Friday here in the US. I don't know what day it was in Australia, but not only going to be a humongous part of this Adelaide 36ers potential juggernaut, but now Australian citizenship as well. You take it away what this means for the Adelaide 36ers, because this was a great scoop by you, and perhaps the biggest hypothetical in Australian basketball of the last 6 or 7 years is no longer.
Yeah, and we can talk the Boomers ramifications with Bryce in a little bit, but the NBL ramifications are significant. I immediately think of, you're initially recruiting Bryce Cotton this offseason as an import, right? An import free agent. And you're thinking this guy's going to take up roughly 70% of our salary cap. And so there is a good chance that you're going to have to just eat a ton of luxury tax, and it's just going to cost you a lot of money. Now that you can marquee him, instead of 70% of the salary cap, he takes up around 12% of the salary cap. That is so significant when you think of the talent that he is and the fact that you can put 3 imports around him as well. Like that's so significant for this team, not just this season, where I think they'll gauge in the middle of the season whether or not they'll need an import, right? They'll see what the team is first. But future seasons, Bryce Cotton signed for 3 years. And so next season, the season beyond that, and one after that too, you're thinking about, all right, we're building around Bryce Cotton as a local. So the possibilities for this 36ers team are seemingly endless because of this.
The Adelaide 36ers have always struck me as a team, and I said this at the start of last year, where it just felt like they just kept on wanting to tell everyone how good they were going to be, and they've been disrespected, and now they've brought in a new coach. They do a lot of talking for a team that has done very little winning. So I'm very glad to hear that this 36ers team feels like it's got a little bit of stability this year. When you think about bringing the majority of the guys back, Kendric Davis, we'll talk about him a little bit later, but you are able to bring Montrezl Harrell back. You obviously got DJ. Bryce is the big one, but most people would believe that he can fit in any system. He's just that damn good. He doesn't have to play on the ball. He can play off the ball. Obviously, a generational NBL player. So I like the fact that the earlier reporting from yourself, and certainly what you're hearing out of Adelaide, is that they'll just see how this looks. Because I do think that certainly the vibes feel like they're good coming out of this Adelaide training camp and preseason, and they seem to be on the same page. They seem to want to put last year behind them and bounce back. So I think they've still got so many questions to answer in this rotation and how all these guys fit together that I like the fact that they would have a bit of patience.
Yeah, and I think the talent on the team is pretty undeniable, especially the top-end talent. You look at it, and from the imports to Isaac Humphries, to DJ Vasiljevic, to the bench that they've brought in. The talent is really, really impressive. For me, it's more, what does the balance look like? Because it looks like they have a lot of guys who do a lot of similar things. Montrezl Harrell and Zylan Cheatham, it's really similar players as far as the production that they're going to bring. DJ Vasiljevic and Bryce Cotton are really similar players. Where does Flynn Cameron fit in all this? Where does Isaac Humphries fit in all this? They're talented individuals, right? These guys are talented in a vacuum, but do they fit together? There's a good argument that you can make talent work, or talent will make itself work, but the balance is the thing that I'm looking for, right? Who ball carries? Who plays the point while Bryce Cotton and DJ Vasiljevic are coming off curls and screens off the ball and things like that? How do you incorporate a lot of non-shooting bigs? That's what I'm looking for. And until you know what that looks like out there, then you don't really know what they're going to need. My feel is that mid-season, I have a feeling that there's going to be a need for like a stretch four, like a forward type who can maybe come off the bench, stretch the floor, grab a couple rebounds. That feels like what they're going to need. There could be a need for a point guard at some point, depending on what Flynn Cameron gives you, what Isaac White gives you off the bench. I'm very curious what this team is going to look like, but I agree with the sentiment that they're pushing so far, which is we're going to be patient and see what this looks like first before we make any rash decisions on another import.
Yeah, I got Isaac Humphries circled as one of the big questions. We know that he can be a good player. I don't think that it worked perfectly alongside Montrezl Harrell. Now, Montrez is actually more unselfish than he gets credit for. I think he's a good facilitator, and we saw that in stretches last year. And the problem is he's also one of the most dominant forces where Isaac probably likes to operate a little bit. So I don't know how those two work. And it looked like it was a frustrating year for Isaac Humphries. And maybe he is just a defensive guy and he doesn't have to do much on offense. And that's the way they play because they got all the talent. Is he happy with not getting those touches? And to your point about DJ, is he happy if you get to the third quarter and all of a sudden he's taken 2 shots? Is he going to take 5 in a row to get his? I don't think it'll start that way. But the question is what it looks like in round 10 and 11 and 12 the longer this season goes, because this is a marathon of an NBL season that's extended this year. And this team, I don't care what they really look like in October. I'm asking what they look like in January on the road to the playoffs there. I would say my point with the Adelaide 36ers about the type of player they would want, if I was looking at it, would be a guard, a defensive guard, or a defensive wing. Think about guys like Antonius Cleveland in the past. They really don't have to do anything offensively, but they can lock down another player because the talent around the league is so good defensively, and I'm not sure I see it on paper for the Adelaide 36ers. But let's move on from Adelaide now. We are going to try and get through these topics a little bit faster. Now, if you are talking about Bryce Cotton being an Australian citizen, your mind might very quickly go to the Perth Wildcats and how they felt when this went down at the time. Now, they've signed Mason Jones, a guy who has been a G League Finals MVP in the past, around 24 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds, shoot the absolute crap out of the ball. He looks like an incredibly talented player. And the fact, again, that you broke this news and the team very quickly said, hey, we're going to announce it on Monday. I don't know if they just had no one in office over the weekend. That's probably the case. So they said, we're going to do this on Monday. But it felt like a little softening of the blow because I'm still looking through social media and seeing some angry Wildcats fans.
Yeah, I felt a little bit bad because I broke the Mason Jones news, and as I was breaking it, literally in the process of doing so, I got word about Bryce's citizenship being approved. And so I was giving the Wildcats positive news as the messenger. But then this negative news for the Wildcats was about to come too. So I felt really bad about it. But Mason Jones, in his own right, is a very, very talented player. In the G League, he has been unbelievable. He is extremely productive as a scorer, as someone who can distribute. He's elite coming off ball screens. Watching some of the film, I'm seeing a bit of Trey Kell to him. And Trey Kell, we forget, was a really, really high-level player in the NBL. All-NBL first team last season, helped lead that Illawarra Hawks team to a championship. And I see shades of Trey Kell in Mason Jones. The talent is there. The thing that I'm curious about is defensively, him and Ben Henschel next to each other. What does that look like? You have the insurance of Dylan Windler and Christian Doolittle and JLA behind them, but as a backcourt, I'm curious what that looks like together. And then who carries it? It feels like Mason Jones comes off a lot of ball screens. He does a lot of he operates a lot with the ball in his hands. So does Ben Henschel, but Ben Henschel can also be someone who plays off the ball. I'm curious at how these two combo guards, no one's a true point on this team. Even Elijah Pepper off the bench, not a true point. I'm curious how these combo guards are going to work. But one thing is for sure, they got a very, very talented basketball player.
They did, no question. Now, you mentioned some of the different ways you can score. Make sure you do tune into Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops this week. Thursday night, on ESPN. You can also find it. I had a few people ask me. You can also find it on Disney Plus, the full episode. Will be a Nothing But Net tab there, and you can find each episode in full, because there were some questions last year. Where can I find this? Why isn't it on YouTube all the time? That's out of my hands. I can't control that, Olgun. But what I can tell you now is that it's going to be on Disney Plus. So I think the Wildcats, if you do connect it to the Bryce Cotton situation, it's fascinating, because if you just look at the numbers, that might be able to soften the blow. But we've also seen a bunch of guys that are talented, and they come in, and it's only 1 year, or they aren't able to find the consistency as they try and find their footing. So I do think, I hope he's ready. He's going into a very, very passionate environment. And if for whatever reason this team struggles out the gate, I don't know how these fans are going to take this. And I look at the Wildcats and I go, I think overall, you mentioned some of the names there, being able to lock down Doolittle, who proved in the playoffs last year that maybe he can actually be an offensive guy. That 37-point game, averaged 25 points per game in that series against Melbourne. So maybe he can do a little bit more. I know we've heard quotes from Dylan Windler saying that he's going to have a bounce back here. He wasn't happy with how it went last year. I actually look at the Wildcats, guys like Pepper, who you mentioned, but then it is Ben Henschel, who probably didn't have as big a performances with the Boomers that we thought maybe we might get out of him, although it was a pretty talented squad. And then a guy like Lat Main and David Aquera, who we spoke about like 3 years ago when he was playing at Melbourne, and he looked like he was almost ready to make a bit of an impact. Do any of those guys, because you look at the backups, and it's really largely these local guys, these young guys, if they take a step, this team could be really, really damn good. So I think it's an interesting mix that they've got, a very talented team with still some questions.
Yeah, one name you didn't mention, which I think is understated, is Sunday Dech. And between Sunday Dech and Latin,
I think he's proven. That's why I was Sunday.
I agree with you.
I think we know what he's going to do, yeah.
No, I agree with you. But I think he brings like an absolute need for this team, which is point of attack defense and a bit of leadership off the bench as well. This is a Wildcats team that has had a turnover of personnel, but now they've sort of locked in on a lot of guys for multi-year deals, and Sunday Dech is one of them. And so between Sunday Dech and Joe Altuve Jr., this is who you're sort of rolling with, including and those two imports. A question I've got is Mason Jones, elite in the G League over the past couple of seasons, from a production standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint. He played 8 games in Turkey, and he averaged, and it's somewhat concerning. It's more just like a question, like this is his one stint outside of America, and he averaged 8 points a game, 3 assists a game on really bad shooting splits. So I'm curious is that what he looks like when he's overseas? Small sample size, right? 8 games. But that was the one situation he had overseas. The rest was in the G League. You could argue that the NBL, as far as overseas leagues, is the most similar to the G League as far as the pace of play. But FIBA rules are a little bit different, and so I'm curious to see which Mason Jones we get. As far as the pieces around him, I like Lat Mayen as someone who I think he is sort of understatedly, steadily improved every season. I think the jump shot is more real than people think it is. I think the defense, especially off the ball, is more real than people think too. So I can see him forging a role in this team. And you spoke about Dylan Windler and those quotes. I spoke to him at the Blitz, and he mentioned that he changed his offseason. He changed his summer to come off more on balls, to work a little bit more with the ball in his hands. And I think he's expecting higher usage. If they can get the peak version of all of these guys, let's say they're top 4 guys, right? Jones, Windler, Doolittle, Achul Jr. That's arguably the most talented 4-man group in the entire league. If they can get optimal output out of those guys offensively especially, then I think the defense should take care of itself with those guys. And again, the top end of this team is really, really talented. I'm looking at Lat Mayen, Sunday Dech, and if Elijah Pepper can bring any of that NBL 1 form into the NBL.
Yeah, defense rebounding has been a problem for the Wildcats in recent years. So we'll see. They might take some time with a few of these new pieces coming in as well. Let's move on to the Illawarra Hawks, the defending champs. You knew that we had to talk about the team from the Gong that created a little bit of history last year. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think about this team. But before we get to it, let's hear from the great Leonard Copeland, because he had some thoughts on where this team sits.
I'm going to go with the Illawarra Hawks again, because when you bring in a guy like McGee, who the way he's been playing in Puerto Rico, and you add a couple of pieces here or there with that coach, he knows what he's doing. He knows what it takes. Those guys are fired up. I'm going to go with the Hawks to win it again.
So Copes thinks that they can go back-to-back. Now, he seems very, very excited about the addition of JaVale McGee. Now, by the way, if you go to Disney Plus, I'm not sure if they're up there yet, but they will be at some point. I went through and did team by team previews, around 5 to 6 minute clips. So it's very easy to get through a little game. Truth or Trash with Gazy and Cope. So make sure you check that out. That's where you will hear some more hot takes from our guy Cope. So Illawarra, I think the big concern clearly is depth, because the reason why I was so high on the Hawks last year was because I felt that they could play every single style of basketball that was asked of them. And even think about what went down late in the season, whether it's Darius Days with a hamstring injury. And it's like, that's cool. We can cover him. It's not too bad. We've still got Sam Frolin that's going to play the 5. We can go a bit smaller if we need to with Lockie Olbrich. Then you lose Frolin in the finals series, and you think, well, this is absolutely over now. And who did they lean on? In the last 3 games of that series, Lockie Olbrich plays 20-plus minutes, footwork out of this world. He's just dazzling all the defenders from Melbourne United, and he had such a big impact for this team. They had the shooters off the bench. Dave Hickey was coming off the bench, and he ends up, Daly suggesting he should have been the grand final MVP. I think everyone thought for the winning team, he was by far the most impactful player. So they were able to tick every box. They've lost so much depth in this team. I know it's hard to keep all these guys, but do you think they did enough to, again, try and get back to where they were?
Let's put it this way. They replaced Trey Kell, an all-NBL first-team guy, let's say with Dave Hickey, right? Because he jumps into the starting lineup. Then they replaced Dave Hickey with Ja'Cory McLaughlin, right? A lot of people around the league see Ja'Cory McLaughlin as like a third import. Then they replaced Darius Days with Jonah Bolden. I'll leave it to everyone at home whether they think that's an upgrade or not. A lot of people around the league don't think it's an upgrade. There's an argument that there's a similar level of player. And then you replace Lockie Olbrich with whom? Right? That's the big question, right? Let's say you're ostensibly replacing Sam Frolin with JaVale McGee. And McGee, he'll be super interesting in the NBL. They played a behind closed doors warm-up game against the Sydney Kings over the weekend. And everyone in that building just told me that JaVale McGee is huge. He's listed at 7 foot. Nah, he's 7'1" and a bit and long as hell. He's an unbelievable body, right? As a physical specimen. What can he do in the NBL? In Puerto Rico, he was really talented, but does that league translate to this one? I don't know the answer to that, but they really just have to hold down the fort until Sam Frolin can slowly get back from this Achilles injury. And when he does come back, we don't even know what he's going to look like. And so when you look at the ins and outs, I don't know if what they've replaced some of these guys with are at the same level. And I think the big one is not you replace Trey Kell with a third import, and you don't really replace Lockie Olbrich. So I just think they've just lost too much talent for me to take them completely seriously until they go and show enough, right? I like their depth. They kept their core early in the offseason, which was so important, right? Blanchfield, Peatling, Greeter, that was important. But also, who have they replaced Hyunjung Lee with? They haven't done that yet. It's probably going to be either Johnny Narkle or they brought in Jonah Antonio or Tom Kubank to come and work out with them to see if they want to bring them in. It's just a significant talent drop just from a pure roster perspective, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And even a guy like Blanchfield, who just found a fountain of youth there with some of those games where he just went absolutely ballistic. But we kind of spent in the time. And it's not just him, but it did feel like they were on this magic carpet ride where just everything was going well for them. Everything was perfect. The miracles were happening. And I don't know whether they've got enough depth right now as it says. I need to see them play. I do need to see JaVale McGee, because the other realistic question you would have is, like, I know he doesn't look like he's lost his athleticism. We saw some of the highlights of him playing overseas, and the guy is simply an anomaly in the NBL. You pointed to his size. There just aren't that many guys in this league that have that size, plus the athleticism. So it looks like he's still got that. So I do think that he's going to be a big factor. But if it is Bolden and Peatling and then Harry Frolin, who, by the way, incredible story. Everyone is happy to see him. But I don't think it would be fair to ask him to come in and be where he was at before the incident that went down. You know, I think he'll need some time to get back to the level, and I think that's a reasonable question. So I do have, some queries over how much they're going to be asking this 38-year-old in this league. Now, again, he does look in great shape, and he looks like he's going to be an impact player. But the Hawks, for me, a watch, and we'll see whether they do anything with another import there in terms of any changes early in the season if things don't get underway. The one guy I do have a hell of a lot of trust in is Justin Tatum, the head coach who's done nothing but win in this league since he came here. He's going to join us on Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops this year. So I'll put it to him. You tell me. I don't think you've got the depth. Why are you going to win games early in the season? So we look forward to hearing from Justin Tatum. Now, you said something interesting to me about Melbourne United. Now, we were discussing different teams and bouncing some ideas around, and And you seem to have been having some conversations with people, and not necessarily tied to Melbourne United, that might think that everyone's kind of sleeping on this Dean Vickerman squad.
Yeah, I think it's because, look, Adelaide reloaded. They bring Bryce in. The Perth Wildcats bring in Joe Lualachua Jr. The Cairns Taipans shock everyone. They bring in Jack McVeigh. So there have been so many, and the Sydney Kings bring in Matthew Dellavedova and Kendric Davis. There have been so many cool stories of teams signing high-level, high-profile guys. And I think because Milton Doyle had a poor season last year with the Jack Jumpers, people completely understate what he's going to bring to Melbourne United. But I was around the Blitz. I spoke to a lot of players just around the league about, all right, who do you have? Like, who do you think is going to win it all this year? Who's your preseason power ranking number one? And enough of them, the majority of them, said Melbourne United. And it's a mixture of them having trust in Milton Doyle and what he's going to bring to the table, them just having general trust in their system, what Chris Golding can do, what Shea Ilick can do, them United bringing in Finn Delaney and this import group that they brought in, which is really, really fascinating. And then just trusting Dean Vickerman as a head coach, because what he's done in this league has been unbelievably impressive. So a lot of players around the league just have trust that between the top end talent and the depth of this United team, that they're going to be the team that it's probably the safest bet to be the number one seed and potentially win it all. Right now, they feel like highest floor, really good ceiling if all those imports and Milton Doyle work out.
Yeah, we've had so many conversations over the last couple of years where I basically said, and now, to be fair, I question Melbourne and their ability to score the ball once it got to the playoffs. And yet they could easily sit there and say, well, you're an absolute moron because we probably should have 2 titles in our hands from the last 2 years. If just the tiniest things went our way last year, I know there's all the talk about, Sam Froling, but Shea Ilick, he's a big question mark this year. Can he stay healthy? If he can stay healthy right throughout the year and fingers crossed, just avoid the concussion injuries, then they're going to be simply much better for that. But one of my big concerns was just how much they were asking for the fine wine, Chris Golding, who you could make the case his last 2 regular seasons were the best regular seasons he's ever had. He doesn't look like he's slowing down. He looks in tremendous shape. He's still playing high 20s minutes per game. But they did get to the grand final series last year, and he was 16 for 50 from 3. He was under 40% from the field overall. And I don't know how much of that had to do with playing an Illawarra team that had guys that can harass and physically get into you like they did throughout. That's going to take a physical toll. It was a tough series. We saw Matthew Dellavedova look incredibly fatigued at the end of that series as well. So that's natural. But you are asking more from guys when they get into their mid and into their late 30s. So I love the fact that they bring in an import guard in Tyson Walker that can really help this team. You have Milton Doyle, as you said, who Milton Doyle has never played with a guy like Chris Golding. I know Jack McVeigh was there for a while, but Chris Golding for a decade has been a more significant threat from the half-court offensive perspective. So I think all these guys can help each other. And ultimately, if it means a little less requirement on Chris Golding to drop 40 and 50 in this stage of his career, I think that's really going to help.
I think 2 seasons ago, United lost in Game 5 of the Championship Series, and I think the swing guy, as much as Jack McVeigh was like the story because of the shot and how well he played, the Jack Jumpers' best player and leader of that team was Milton Doyle. And we forget in Game 5 of that series that it was Milton Doyle who had it was a tough floater in the lane, and he was the one creating. And then last season, Game 5, it was Trey Kell who had a really, really awesome game. Basically, he was one of the guys who put the team on his back. And so I think Dean Vickerman saw, man, yes, it's good to have someone like Delhi, who's an awesome floor general and connector, but it would just be really good to have one of these import advantage creators, someone who's just going to go and create something out of nothing. And he's got that, not just in Milton Doyle, who we forget can average in, above 15 points a game, but also 5 or 6 or 7 assists a game. That's what his game really is. And then Tyson Walker, who over the preseason has looked electric, not just as someone who's super quick, he's going to get in the lane, but also as a jump shooter. There's something there. I think he's just going to bring a completely different dynamic. And those 2 guys are something that this team hasn't had in a little bit. Ian Clark was close to it, but Tyson Walker as a competitor and as a ball carrier and as an advantage creator, and Milton Doyle. And I'm a big fan of Jesse Edwards in the little bit we've seen of him so far. He, like JaVale McGee, is just really big, see him in person, watch him on the court, just a massive physical point of difference in the NBL. I think he's someone who's going to go manufacture points and he's going to deter and block a lot of shots. I like him as well. So I like the way they've reloaded. They've gotten a little bit younger. They've added a bit more diamondism and they've gotten quicker. So I really like the balance that this team has. And that's not even talking about their bench, which I think might be one of the best in the league, because everyone is just a high floor, high character, reliable dude, from Chris Levitt to Krebs to Kyle Bowen, it's to Tom Wilson. I think all these guys can make an impact. Again, high floor, and if all these imports work out, high ceiling team.
Hey, look, take this in the right spirit, Melbourne United, but I think this is a more entertaining version than what we've seen in previous years. That's all. All you win games. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, let's get to the Sydney Kings and Kendric Davis, what this fit looks like. But before we do, I want to hear from DJ Vasiljevic talking about the chemistry of the Adelaide 36ers locker room.
I don't know. It's just like we just got to keep, gelling together and keep working hard, and then let everything fall into place. But the best thing we've done is recruit people who are great people off the court as well. I think we didn't have a great chemistry or bonding off the court last year, and we've done more pretty much in the past 3 or 4 weeks than we did pretty much all the last years.
Interesting, because I think a lot of people will take that as an absolute direct shot at Kendric Davis. I kind of didn't quite read it like that. I think what DJ was actually describing was the fact that Adelaide have had more time to get on the same page. I already briefly mentioned that before. But nonetheless, if I'm Kendric Davis, I'm taking it as a shot at me, because almost all the pieces are back in Adelaide, which means that there's one guy that's not there. And now they're saying that everyone is on the same page, everyone gets along, everyone's happy. Kendric Davis has spoken about his goals to get back to the NBA. This could be a highly volatile situation in Sydney. And my question is, what do you think with Dellavedova up there, Brian Goorjian, who was trying to fit all the pieces together? How do you see the fit? Because I find the rhetoric out of Adelaide fascinating. I find the general idea of Kendric Davis you see on social media that he's a problem interesting. So now it's all on him with the Sydney Kings team to get it done and ultimately be a good locker room guy for this team.
Firstly, was DJ recording that from Siberia? I've never seen someone so beanied up in an interview before. Is it that cold over in Adelaide?
I don't know. He said it was cold. I did question that.
Absolutely cannot be that cold. It cannot be that cold. The Adelaide comments, I appreciate that they can be directed at Kendric Davis, and we've spoken before about some of the intel around world basketball that I think Davis knows about and he's trying to dispel as well. I think that the Adelaide stuff is more, they brought in guys like Zylan Cheatham and Isaac White and Michael Harris and Flynn Cameron, and these are competitive dudes, guys who've come from good programs, and these are people who are just bringing a different culture. I think things just got a bit stale in Adelaide, and from what I've heard anecdotally, they have improved their culture in a substantial way this season. But I think that's more also Mike Wells in his second season in the NBL. So I think it's a lot of things beyond just what they might be saying, those sort of underhanded comments about Kendric Davis. It feels like it's, for the most part, all of those other things, bringing in good guys. As for the Sydney Kings, I spoke with Delly and Kendric. I had them together for my interview with them at the Blitz, and I have a story next week on ESPN. And it was really interesting. Delly, Kendric Davis, and Xavier Cooks got together in California in the offseason. Basically what I was told was Delly sort of took Kendric. It sounded like by like the cover of the shirt. But but from what Kendric told me, he sort of pulled Kendric aside and said, hey, look, follow my lead. Do what I say. I'm going to make you the best player in the league. I'm going to make you an MVP. I'm going to get you to the NBA. But do what I say. Follow my lead. And I think Delly is someone who Davis has a ton of respect for because of what Matthew Dellavedova did in the NBA with the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's won a championship as a primary guy on that team. And so I think Davis sees that and thinks, this is someone whose lead I can follow. And if I want to get to the NBA, I do have to do what this guy says and follow his lead. And there's also respect for someone like Brian Goorjian, Andrew Bogut in that coaching staff, Luke Longley, Chris Pongrass. And so I think Kendric Davis knows that if he wants to get to the NBA, he has to be with the Sydney Kings, perform at the MVP level that he did last season, but also be a really good citizen. And I think he is aware of that. How the combo works, two ball-carrying guards, I'm very curious to see. But again, you trust a smart player like Delly and someone super talented like Kendric to figure it out. But I think Davis knows that he has to go and show leadership skills, show that he's a really good teammate. And that is how not just the Kings will succeed, but that's how he's going to get to the NBA, which is his ultimate goal.
Yeah, your last point is exactly where I was going to go. And firstly, you're absolutely right. There is no better person to play alongside him than Matthew Dellavedova. And I'm glad you mentioned Andrew Bogut as well. Two guys that, look, if you can't respect what they've done in world basketball and let them guide you to how you can get to the highest level, then you're probably not going to listen to anyone. So I do think that this is the perfect environment for Kendric Davis to have a great year and shut everyone up. Because ultimately, that's what he should be planning to do this season. Yes, it's about his own good basketball, but it's about making sure that no one can talk any crap about him anymore about being a problem. That whole Adelaide situation was a disaster last year. I don't think that anyone could sit back and say it was just him and now he's gone and everything's great. That's ridiculous. We'll see what it looks like in Adelaide this year. As you said, they've got a bunch of great character guys in the locker room. That's exactly what DJ's comment was about there, and I hope that they get on the same page. But I think this is going to be a good situation for Kendric Davis. But in terms of how Kendric fits alongside Daly, I think it's an ideal test to play alongside a point guard like Daly, who we've seen just win the grand final MVP. So he's still playing at a high level himself. He's a great organizer. He'll be able to throw those lobs to Galloway and Xavier Cooks. Because if Kendric Davis really is going to get to the NBA, I don't really see him going to the NBA and being a ball dominant guard. That's not the role for him in the NBA. The role for him is going to be like, can you play off the ball? Can you knock down those outside shots? And can you defend? So I think the Sydney Kings team was a little bit of a mess last year in terms of trying to figure out rotations, and they obviously had a lack of size, but they still had the number one defensive rating in the NBL in the regular season. So that was still a team that could defend. They've still got unbelievable pieces defensively, athletically. So for Kendric, it's about fitting into that. We all know the talent, but that's not the question. The question is, can you fit in a role, probably still lead the team in scoring? That's totally fine. That's ultimately his number one skill set. But can you be a piece of this team and help them win a title? That's what'll get him there.
And look, Kendric should be a top 3 scorer in the NBL. He was top 2 last season. And the only reason he wasn't one was because Bryce went absolutely insane. The other thing I'm looking at with this Sydney Kings team, and yes, we're putting a lot of onus on Kendric Davis to step up and be able to be malleable and fluid and fit with this Kings team. But we have to remember, there's a Kings team that, yes, they were number 1 in defense last regular season. They're also a bottom 4 offensive team. So this is a team that did not operate well on the offensive end. Dellavedova ostensibly comes in to improve that. And obviously, so does Kendric Davis. They obviously help this. These are the top 2 assist guys in the league last season. However, I'm watching preseason and I'm seeing Delly handle the ball a lot, which is fine. There's a lot of the usage seems quite high with Delly right now, as far as getting shots up, getting on the rim. And I'm curious if Delly maybe dials that back a little bit and leans into what I think is his actual skill set, the most elite thing he brings, which is being a connective point guard. And if he's someone who can maximize Kendric Davis, Xavier Cooks, Jalen Galloway, Tim Suarez, if he maximizes them and connects them and is the ultimate floor general, then I think the ceiling of this Kings team is very high. I think the offense can be elite. I want to see Delly sort of halve some of the aimless drives and some of the weird shots that he takes, and I want to see him double the sort of connectiveness. If he does that, then if the Kings defense should be at the level, and I think he can improve the offense in a significant way if he leans into that skill set.
Yeah, well said. And a bunch of teams in this show that we didn't get to yet, but the podcast next week. Hey, Olgun, I'm coming to Australia. We can do this podcast sitting next to each other. It's going to be a lot of fun. But this was the first episode of the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast for this season. A new look, an advanced look, an upgraded look. The podcast has gone to a new level. Olgun, thank you very much. Make sure you check out Nothing But Net on ESPN and, of course, Disney Plus as well.